thinking about social media and how it plays a role in our society. The reality is that what schools were to the kids in the 60s and 70s. I mean, I listened to my parents talk about school and how there was pride in it and meeting and going, after football games and those kind of things and going out and even hear Dragon Van Buren. I mean, that atmosphere, meeting up at the school, doing those kind of things is what the mall was. If you're from the 80s and 90s, you would go to the mall and when you get dropped off, even here at Oakwood, and we would hold hands, we'd walk the mall around the outside perimeter until the movie started because there wasn't stores back then to shop at either. And then what those things is what the internet is to the millennial, to the 2000s, the 2000 teens. They also, that's their thing. That was their school, that was their mall. Does that make sense? This is where they connect online. So when we take that away from them, we're taking away their social interaction. We're taking away where they meet up with their friends. So remember when you were grounded and weren't allowed to go to the mall, so you had to stay home and play an old board game or an old video game system or something like that. That's the same mindset of when we take away the phone, when we take away social media, we've grounded them from their social interaction. And I don't think we think about it that way very often, and I want to make sure that you can see that as we move forward. So let's talk about social networks and where they are in contrast in our culture. Facebook is the largest, 2.2 billion users using Facebook. What's been really interesting is here very recently, Facebook said publicly after the most latest fiasco that we're going to delete all fake accounts. If we know it's a fake account, we're going to delete them. And in one day, they deleted something like 100 million Facebook accounts that they already found. And I think they're already up to literally a couple 100 million Facebook accounts, fake Facebook accounts that were created for no good thing other than to dig up, make political things or to even do catfishing, like just pornography things. I mean, all of that was part of that push. And so I'm not real positive because that happened in the last couple weeks if that stat holds up right now. Google Plus is interesting because they claim 2 billion users on Google Plus, but what's interesting about Google Plus is many people are like, what? What is Google Plus? So Google Plus was basically a social network for a really short window of time, and they're still saying if you sign up, basically if you have a Gmail account, a Google Maps account, any of that, they count you. So you count, they've created an account for you, you just don't use it, all right? So that's how they're boasting that number. That's why I put an asterisk by that one. So both of them, there's some question right now where they exist. What leads YouTube at 1.5 billion users and Instagram at 800 million users. So I told the students today that I would ask you the same questions I asked them. How many of you all, but I'm gonna go backwards. So I asked them first, how many of you all use Snapchat on a regular occurrence? Okay, how many? It's not. You're like, it's okay. How many use Instagram? Okay. How about Twitter? Facebook? Yeah. And then YouTube? Okay, not for many. So it's interesting. So can you imagine what the results were today when I asked the students the same questions? So it says, I said, how many of you use Facebook? Like 2 kids, and they got mocked, like you guys just did with Snapchat. Then I said Twitter, and not very many. And then I did Instagram, and a third of the room. And then I did Snapchat, and 80% of the room, which was the exact opposite of where we're at in this room, which is really, really, really interesting. And so that's why we've kind of talked about a lot of different things. So here are the top apps, and I'm going to move into that conversation right now. So just to show you where they fit in the realm of the rest of the world. So worldwide, Messenger is number 1. That is Facebook's messaging system now. And they've made a new kid version, which is real interesting. I have a friend that works at Facebook who actually is working on the kid messenger. So I sent him a Facebook message the other day. And I said, can you give me some insight? Because how does this work with the child laws that we have in place for kids under 13 to use it? Because you're targeting kids under 13 to use Facebook Messenger. And he said, we've been working hand in hand to make sure that we are completely, none of the information is passed on. And they say it's 100% legal, but it's going to be really, really interesting as we continue to have that conversation of where that plays in. But Messenger is continuing to grow in a really huge way. They would like to be the way we text, essentially. And so instead of texting it all with your phone, you'll just use Messenger. That's the idea that Facebook has, and they're hoping that we go to. They started internet.org. So if you've seen that website, internet.org, their goal is to provide internet for the whole world. So they've been dreaming up really cool things like this plane that flies itself and can fly for 30 straight days, has no pilot, and it flies tens of thousands of feet in the air, and it just provides Wi-Fi networks throughout the world. Because who needs water when you can have internet, right? No, that's a bad joke. So their idea is if we can get technology and internet in those places, we'll be able to do the other things necessary, water, food, so some of the other parts of the world. But WhatsApp app or WhatsApp, WeChat, Qzone is the one that nobody ever knows. That's essentially the Facebook of Asia. And so in China, that is what they use because they're not allowed to use Facebook. And so right now, Facebook, they're trying to get into that market because they've got half the world and they need the other half, and they're going to have to get China involved at some point. And so Qzone is huge because that's what they're allowed in China. And then finally, Snapchat. 300 million users, verified accounts, which is just dramatically low. When I talk to every single school I talk to, and over 80% of the kids say, I've got Snapchat, and then I ask parents, and they're like 4. Every single time. No matter where I am in the country, when I ask those questions, same thing, same results. So it's really interesting to me, and that is why 300 is so low, is because it's just students. And why Facebook and Instagram is so high, because adults are finding this is a great way to keep in touch with my high school friends and people I haven't kept in touch with in a very, very long time. So let's talk about Snapchat really, really specifically. 3.5 billion snaps a day. We already talked about that. The second one is I heard Snap Streaks a little while ago. This actually is out of date. I just noticed that. I updated it in our other slide. But the current Snapchat streak is 1,230-something days. So what is a Snapchat streak? This is where two Snapchatters, two individual profiles, communicate back and forth at least one time a day. So they snap to this person and this person snaps back. And if that happens, that interaction, at least one time in a day, and they do it consecutively, once they hit 4 consecutive days, they have a streak. And they keep the streak alive. So the record right now, they've literally been talking for almost 4 years, having never missed a day. And you say, well, how in the world is that possible? Well, even today I asked the students, I said, how many of you have given up your password when you went on vacation or you knew you were going to be grounded from your phone to keep your snap streaks alive? And how many? Half. Half said, I give up all the time to keep the Snapchat streak alive, which is really interesting to us. Because again, Snapchat, there's some deep psychology in this, some really deep science that says, how can we keep kids at the casino floor and keep pulling that lever? How do we keep them here? And it's the same thing YouTube does. You can watch YouTube, and what happens after your video finishes? It loads up another one. You probably want this one. And it's like the lottery. Do you like this video? We'll give you another one. And Netflix does the same thing now. That's why we do all this, and we continue to go and we binge watch, and how this is now accepted in our culture to binge watch. It's okay to binge watch all of The Office. I understand. All right? In the evening, how somehow that's culturally okay. Whereas if you would have done it 15 years ago, it's like, you have a problem. Like if you stay home and watch all of those. And so that's kind of that idea. 80% of teens say they use Snapchat. We see that the average user visits Snapchat 18 times a day, and here's my favorite statistic. When asked students why they use Snapchat, 30% of them say, because my parents don't. Like the reason I'm on Snapchat is because my parents are not on Snapchat. One of my most interesting things, in my opinion, about Snapchat is the spam accounts. And we were talking about that this morning. And the idea that maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't. So a lot of students will set up 2 accounts, one for their parents to follow and one for their friends to have. Or they'll set up a spam account, which basically means they're sharing that account with other students. So they can get online and both keep the snap streak alive, and 2, have conversations that you'll never be privy to because they're all internally in the app. And so then when you have set your standards on your thing that you're not allowed to download these apps, well, if they've ever downloaded it once they delete the app, the system, iTunes says it's okay to re-download anytime they want. So if they downloaded it way back when and you've since said you can't have that app, you're going to delete it, so you delete the app, well, they can still re-download it and it won't get a notification. Does that make sense? So I hear parents all the time go, I didn't know that was possible. So kids a lot of times will use it all day long, and before they get home, delete it. And in the morning, re-download it on their way to school and use it all day long and then delete it. And so that's happening quite a bit. And that's a real big conversation. And what can we do about that? I mean, nothing. They're like inmates in prison. They've come up with really creative ways to get around every single barrier that we try to throw at them. And so at the end of the day, the only thing we can do is create some parameters to help them make healthy choices themselves. And that's what a lot of what we talk about. So because of that, I'm going to ask some questions to you right now to see if you're willing to make some of those healthy boundaries for yourself. So this really smart people, way smarter than me, have come up with this idea that they call Facebook depression. And it's really not about Facebook, it's more about social media, but because Facebook's the biggest, it gets the name. Facebook depression is what they've coined it as, and they're saying Facebook is more addicting than cigarettes. It's more addicting than gambling. Like, our cell phones are the same course. I heard a writer recently kind of contribute those together and said, when you wake up, if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think about is having a drink of alcohol, and you go to bed and the last thing you think about is having a drink of alcohol, what are you? An alcoholic. But if the first thing we do in the morning is get out our phone, and the last thing we do is get out our phone, what are we? We're not addicted to phones? What? How does that work? And I'm not trying to compare the two, because alcoholism is a whole other category too. I'm not saying that. What I am saying, let's be honest about the conversation that's now on our doorstep. And so let's ask you the same questions that you would get asked if you went into that same setting. So that top quote says the average person spends 75 minutes per day on Facebook. So over an hour every single day on Facebook on average. Some of you get that before you get to work, all right? So here are some of the questions. The first one, are you preoccupied with blank? So I guess real quick, don't nudge your neighbor. You're like, that's you, don't do that. Don't raise your hand, don't say anything out loud and incriminate yourself. Instead, internally, I want you to ask yourself, yes or no, do I do that? Is this me? So the first one, am I preoccupied with Facebook? Like, throughout the day, am I constantly thinking about, I wonder how my status is doing. I wonder if anybody's liked it. I wonder how many, is that you? And some of you are like, no, that's never me. Okay. How often are you preoccupied with your phone? Like, you got to make sure, do I have my phone on me? Like, car keys, phone. Okay. Question 2, increased use of blank. So if we were to look at your last 6 months, is there been an increased use of time on that particular thing? So 6 months ago, I spent this amount of time. Now I do this a lot more. Has there been a dramatic increase in time? Number 3, have you had repeatable, unsuccessful efforts of trying to control the use of whatever it is? Like, you've told yourself, I'm not going to take the phone into the bathroom. And then you're like, well, what else am I supposed to do in the bathroom? Like, so you take it in there anyway. You're like, I'm wasting time here. So that idea, can you not control yourself? I'm only going to be on for about 10 minutes before bed because it helps me fall asleep. And then 2 in the morning, you're like, I love cat videos. Yeah. Number 4, restless, moodiness, depression when you get it taken away or you lose it. So when I talk to kids, I say, how many of you just flip house when you get grounded and your phone taken away? And they're like, oh yeah. So let me turn it to you. How distraught are you when your phone breaks and you got to send it off to get it fixed? Or my watch broke last week and I was like, oh, I don't have it. And so do we get moody about it though? Like, internally, are you depressed because you don't have that access? Does it freak you out? Like, I remember a time where we were able to drive places without using Google Maps. Like, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? You get out this really crazy thing called a map on paper and you try to figure out where you were. I remember being lost on 412 when I was in college going, I don't know where I am in the middle of the night, not knowing, looking at a map going, no clue. But I know if I keep driving west, I'm either going to go through Enid or Texas. And so we'll see what happens. Online longer than originally intended. Oh, this one's a good one. And so I already talked about that. You say, I'm just going to be on for a little bit, and the next thing you know, it's Tuesday. So that happens to some of us. I'm making light of it, but honestly, it's just us. Number 6, jeopardize or risk loss of significant relationships. So you know that you need to engage with your friends, maybe go out and hang out with them, but you'd rather just stay in. Now, some of us are introverts, and that's our wheelhouse, so that's a little bit different. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about you have been blocked, or you have to block people because of the relationships you guys have, and you're willing to keep pushing forward over a political raid or over whatever it is, but you'll risk real life relationships based on a social media post. Right? You're like, no, she didn't post that. And you flip out but you don't talk to them about it. You might comment to let them know that you saw it. Like, you know what I mean? Those kind of things. You know what I'm talking about? Number 7, lies to family members to conceal the use of blank. And so I love this one the most. And I typically use this when I'm talking about the restroom because we all know that you're in the restroom using your phone. We know why you took the charger with you because you plan on being there longer. We know, it blows my mind when I'm at a restaurant and we all see the phone under the table like we don't know. It's like, do you really like looking at your crotch? Or are you doing something under there? We know you're on your phone. It's not new. I talk about it with teachers all the time where students do the same exact thing. They're in their classrooms doing it real quick like the teacher doesn't know. But what's interesting is the teacher will take the phone away, but a lot of students have burner phones now. They'll have 2 phones solely for that one to get taken away. It's cool. They got another one in the locker. Like, I'm just going to go right into it because they don't need a cellular connection. They just need a Wi-Fi connection. And you might say, well, I don't let my kids have, Wi-Fi in the school. So that's fine. They just get on somebody else's account when they link up and make their own Wi-Fi net hotspot with their account because they got unlimited. All right. So the kids will use that person's Wi-Fi. Happens a lot. And I know some of you are going, what? But some of you are going, yep. Number 8, last one. Use blank to escape or relieve problems. And I think this is the most detrimental question on here. Where we don't like the person at night when we're in bed in that quiet space where it's literally just you and your thoughts, and we're not cool with that person anymore. We're not cool with that space. And so we've got to fill it because of all the anxiety. We've got to find some other life because there's so much anxiety evolving around the rest of our life. And we're doing that, and in some ways you might think it's a little bit helpful. It's a way for you to cope with those things, but at the end of the day, we're pushing off the harder conversation that's going to help us to get to a healthier version of ourselves. And this is true through all of culture, throughout all of human history. When we don't take time to align ourselves in the morning for the goals that we want to achieve and reflect at night to what did we accomplish and what do we want to accomplish tomorrow, we can't move forward. In fact, there is some really cool research right now with all the great successful entrepreneurs and different things. And the one thing that they continue to find in common with all of them is that every single one of them takes 15 minutes at least every morning to align their day. They might meditate in that time. They might do different things, but they take 15 minutes to say, what do I want to accomplish today that will help me move further in my goals? But many of us wake up and we immediately get out the phone and we start texting, or we start looking over our emails or seeing if there was an emergency at work or seeing what somebody posted. And we say, I'm just going to do it for a minute because I'm groggy anyway. But then 20 minutes go by and then you're thinking about what's going on in there. And you go to work thinking about what that comment you saw or that post you saw, and you never seriously thought through your day and your thoughts and aligned yourself with that. So, again, I'm not asking you say out loud. I'm just saying if you answered yes to the majority of those questions or all of those questions, science says that we do have a problem. And there's some rewiring that probably needs to happen. So the question then lands in your court. What are you willing to do about it? Like, what do you want to do about it? Because remember, we can't move forward with our kids if we're not willing to be the examples ourselves. And again, I posed this exact same thing with students today, and I asked them the same question. What do you want to do about it now moving forward in everything, with Fortnite, with Snapchat, anything? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying think about these questions now. Are you addicted? Can you control the use? I'd say 90% or more can't. So the question then comes, and when let's transition from you to your student now. And a guy by the name of Andy Brainer wrote a book, Alone. And he makes a lot of different comments. He traveled the entire country and speaking to thousands and thousands of students. And he asked all these students the exact same question. He said, how many of you have, 1,000 friends or 1,000 followers on social media? And every single assembly, kids would raise their hand. How many have 2,000? How many have 3,000? And they'd get that one kid that's got like 5,000, like he's a celebrity, and everybody's like, oh, I know him, I follow him. And so he'd be like, come here and talk to me. So he'd bring him up on stage, and he'd say, out of those 5,000 friends that you have, how many of them would know if a crisis was happening in your life if you didn't post it online? If you didn't post it, how many would know that something's not right in your life? And he's like, no, 2? And he's like, out of those 2, how many would actually show up at your doorstep to see if you're okay? Every single assembly he went to, was 0. And so the question that he's asking is, we have all this connectivity, we have all these friends, but yet for the first time in human history, we're connected like never before, but we're as far apart as we've ever been before. Because we're substituting, I'm keeping up with that high school friend and all of their family on Facebook, instead of calling them, saying, hey, I saw you. And so it'll be really interesting. My 20-year reunion is literally next month, so that's crazy. And so we're going to go to that and experience that. And I'm wondering, what are we going to talk about, since I've already know what's going on and the people that I want to know what's going on, like I follow them on social media. So it'll be interesting. This will be my first experience to figure out what that's like with social media. So I'll be going with those lenses and probably not going just to enjoy it. But that's interesting. But his hypothesis is we're going to see a really messy 20s by all the kids in the current generation, because they're not figuring out how to deal with that inner voice. They're not figuring out how to deal with control. They're not figuring out healthy boundaries for their lives and relationships. And so we're going to see a real messy 20s. So here's some practical things that you can definitely do that I tell every single student. I want to tell every single parent. First and foremost is location services. Secondly, privacy settings. So location services. This one's a tricky one because so many apps utilize location services now. And so it actually defeats the purpose of the app to not use it, like Google Maps. Like if you turn off location services, Google Maps doesn't work, by the way. So it's like, where am I driving? It doesn't know. And so that's that whole thing. What it does is it uses your GPS on your phone to track where you're going. This is why I think you should turn it off for some apps. And what's cool is iTunes has made it a little bit easier, or Apple at least, where you can turn it off on certain apps. So like Instagram is a great example. So if I leave private or location services on Instagram, every time I take a picture, it will tell me where I am taking that picture. So you might say that's totally cool. I like being able to keep track of where that is. And I think there's some good use to it. I do the same thing on my other realm, my other business. But when it comes to first day of school, is it good for us to post first day of school for a third grader, what school they go to, what they look like? Now, if your privacy settings are off and that's open to the entire world, who has access to your kid? Everybody. Everybody. Now, I know you're going, well, the school system will take care of them and protect them, and I think you're right on that, but we as parents also have to do our part to help a little bit, right? And so that's what that conversation is, because a real story, a real situation in Tulsa that they're dealing with is a girl that went missing this is 2 years ago now, and they still have not found her. The last thing that they have evidence-wise was a post that she made that says, parents are out of town, #party for the weekend. And next thing they know, she's gone missing. The front door had been kicked in. So the idea is somebody saw that online account. Maybe it's somebody who knows. Maybe it's somebody she doesn't know. She didn't have privacy settings turned on. She had location services turned on. So that person was able to say, parents out of town, really cute girl, by herself, and this is the address. We don't know if that's true, and I don't say that to be the boogeyman kind of story. I'm just saying that's a real story that happened that we'll still, once that case gets closed, we'll have more information about it. But do you see where that comes from? And that's the extreme, obviously. But my biggest plea is let's at least do privacy settings. And so one of the things I typically do with the selfie seminar and just didn't do today because I had so many is I'll go through before I get to a school to do it. And I did it at Chisholm a few years ago where I go through and I just search random Chisholm Middle School or whatever school I'm going to. And I'll try to find kids that are that age that are somehow attached to the account. And then I'll go through and take pictures like copy their pictures from their accounts, and I'll make a slideshow. And then I'll find their friends, and then my first opening thing I do at Selfie is I run the Selfie song with a slideshow of all the pictures I found on social media of them because they had left me completely open. I did, where was I? I was at Enid High. I was at Waller Middle School last spring, and I did it with Waller Middle School, and a couple of the kids, I just hit friend requests, and they accepted me. And so I got access to a lot of crazy stuff. So I posted all of it. Just here's a scroll of what's going on. And so my sister was like, you should show them that tonight. So you can definitely see some of that. I don't typically publish that one public, but that's all based on privacy settings. And I do that to kind of some of them get a kick out of it. Some of them are like, I don't know that guy, creeper. Sure, but I'm the innocent one. But there are a lot of people out there that aren't.